Most men think they control their emotions, but there's one emotional pattern that takes over the moment a woman goes quiet, not cold, not angry, just calm. And once you see it, you'll never misunderstand their reaction again. Men instinctively react to emotional steadiness. They cannot influence or control because emotional steadiness disrupts a pattern they learned early in life. From a young age, many men are conditioned to associate connection with response. When they speak, someone reacts. When they act, someone adjusts. This feedback loop becomes familiar, comfortable, and eventually invisible. Over time, influence becomes intertwined with safety. If the emotional environment moves when they move, they feel oriented. If it stays still, something inside them starts searching for balance. Emotional steadiness in a woman introduces a pause into this loop. It doesn't argue back. It doesn't escalate. It doesn't chase clarity or reassurance. It simply remains present and self-contained. This steadiness isn't coldness or detachment. It's regulated presence. And regulation is powerful because it removes emotional leverage from the interaction. There's nothing to push against, nothing to pull closer, nothing to provoke. For many men, this is unfamiliar territory. When influence disappears, awareness increases. Men begin to notice their own emotional movement more clearly. They become aware of irritation without an obvious cause, restlessness without direction, attraction mixed with unease. Emotional steadiness reflects their internal state back to them without commentary. It acts like a mirror that doesn't soften the image. This can feel grounding for emotionally mature men, but unsettling for those who rely on emotional reactions to feel secure. Control doesn't always look like dominance. Often, it looks like predictability. Knowing how someone will respond provides a sense of orientation. Emotional steadiness breaks predictability. The man cannot anticipate whether his silence will trigger pursuit or his distance will create anxiety. Without those cues, he has to sit with himself. This is where the instinctive reaction begins. Some men lean in, curious and attentive. Others pull away, feeling exposed without knowing why. The key detail is that the reaction is instinctive, not calculated. Men are not consciously thinking, "I need to regain control." Instead, their nervous system registers a change in the emotional environment. Something that used to respond no longer does. Something that used to move now remains still. The body interprets this as a loss of influence, and the mind tries to resolve it. This is why emotionally steady women are often described as mysterious or intimidating, even when they are kind and open. Mystery isn't created by secrecy, it's created by non-reactivity. When emotions aren't immediately accessible, they gain weight. Men begin to pay closer attention. They listen differently. They notice tone, pauses, and absence. Emotional steadiness creates contrast, and contrast sharpens focus. For men who equate connection with emotional exchange, steadiness can feel like distance. But it isn't distance, it's containment. The woman is still there, still present, still engaged, but she isn't leaking emotion to manage the interaction. She isn't over-explaining. She isn't filling silence. This forces the man to bring more of himself forward if he wants engagement, and that demand reveals his level of emotional capacity. Some men respond with respect because steadiness signals self-sufficiency. It communicates that the woman is not dependent on emotional validation to remain grounded. That independence activates admiration. Others respond with discomfort because they sense they cannot steer the emotional direction of the interaction. The inability to influence creates vulnerability, and vulnerability without tools often turns into withdrawal or defensiveness. This pattern becomes especially clear during moments of conflict or uncertainty. When a woman remains calm instead of escalating, the man loses the familiar structure of tension and release. There is no argument to win, no reassurance to extract, no emotional surge to ride. The calm holds. It doesn't collapse under pressure. That steadiness silently asks the man to regulate himself rather than relying on her reaction to do it for him. Men who have developed emotional regulation experience this as relief. They feel safe in the calm. They feel invited into depth. Men who haven't often feel destabilized. Their usual strategies stop working. Humor doesn't diffuse. Silence doesn't provoke. Intensity doesn't shake the ground. They are left with themselves, and that exposure is uncomfortable. This is why emotional steadiness often triggers testing behaviors. A man may pull away slightly, change tone, or reduce effort to see if the woman reacts. He isn't always aware he's doing this. It's a subconscious check for influence. If she stays steady, the pattern continues to unravel. If she reacts strongly, the system resets and familiarity returns. Steadiness also shifts power dynamics without announcing itself. Power here doesn't mean control over the other person. It means control over one's internal state. When a woman holds her emotional center, she becomes less negotiable emotionally. Men feel this intuitively. They sense that access must be earned through consistency, presence, and respect rather than emotional pressure. This instinctive reaction explains why some men become more attentive around emotionally steady women while others disengage entirely. Both responses are information. One signals readiness for mutual regulation. The other signals discomfort with emotional responsibility. Neither requires confrontation. The steadiness itself does the sorting. Importantly, emotional steadiness is not emotional absence. It is depth without overflow. It allows feelings to exist without demanding immediate action from the other person. Men often misinterpret this as emotional distance because they are used to emotion being expressed outwardly and urgently. But urgency is not depth. Stillness often carries more weight than intensity. When influence is removed, authenticity has nowhere to hide. Men can no longer rely on reaction to guide their behavior. They must decide how to show up without feedback. This moment reveals character, maturity, and emotional literacy. Some step forward, some retreat, some hover, unsure how to proceed. The instinctive reaction is not something men choose. It arises from conditioning, attachment patterns, and nervous system responses. Emotional steadiness bypasses logic and speaks directly to regulation. It asks a silent question: can you stay present without needing to control the emotional flow? And in that question, everything about the dynamic begins to shift. A woman's calm withdrawal triggers unresolved emotional patterns in men, because withdrawal without emotional chaos removes the familiar signals men use to interpret connection. Calm withdrawal is not rejection, punishment, or manipulation. It is simply the absence of pursuit combined with emotional regulation. There is no anger to respond to, no pleading to soothe, no explanation to argue with. The space appears quietly, and that quiet is what activates the pattern. Many men are accustomed to emotional continuity. If something is wrong, it is discussed immediately. If distance appears, it is usually paired with emotional expression. Calm withdrawal breaks this expectation. The woman does not disappear dramatically. She remains grounded, respectful, and internally settled, but she no longer reaches outward to maintain the emotional rhythm. This sudden stillness creates a psychological vacuum. That vacuum pulls unresolved material to the surface. Without emotional noise to focus on, the man becomes aware of sensations he usually bypasses: unease, curiosity, irritation, longing, and confusion begin to cycle internally. The absence of reaction forces introspection, even in men who are not naturally introspective. The nervous system starts scanning for meaning because the usual cues are missing. Unresolved emotional patterns are often built around attachment and reassurance. Many men learn, consciously or not, that emotional connection is maintained through response. If someone pulls away, they chase. If someone shows distress, they fix or disengage. Calm withdrawal offers neither. There is no chase available, and there is nothing to fix. This creates a sense of helplessness that feels disproportionate to the situation, which is how unresolved patterns reveal themselves. The man may tell himself that nothing has changed. He may rationalize the distance as temporary or insignificant, yet his attention keeps returning to the absence. The mind tries to solve what the nervous system feels. Why isn't she reacting? Why isn't she asking? Why does this feel heavier than it should? These questions are not about the woman. They are about regulation. Calm withdrawal removes emotional reassurance without removing restraint. The woman is not hostile. She is not cold. She simply stops overfunctioning emotionally. For men who are used to emotional availability as a constant, This feels like a loss of grounding. The unresolved pattern begins searching for stability, and when it cannot find it externally, it becomes louder internally. This is often when men experience a sudden urge to reinitiate contact, even if they were previously distant. The urge is not always driven by desire. It is driven by the need to restore emotional equilibrium. Calm withdrawal destabilizes old dynamics because it refuses to participate in emotional imbalance. The woman no longer compensates for the man's uncertainty, inconsistency, or avoidance. Some men respond by intellectualizing the situation. They analyze messages, timing, and tone, trying to decode meaning. Others feel irritation rise, mislabeling their discomfort as annoyance or loss of interest. Both reactions are defenses against vulnerability. Calm withdrawal exposes emotional dependency without accusing it. That exposure can feel threatening. The key detail is that calm withdrawal does not ask for change. It simply creates space, and space is where unresolved patterns surface. Without constant emotional engagement, the man must confront his own internal responses. He may notice how much he relied on her presence to feel steady. He may realize how much emotional labor she was carrying quietly. These realizations are uncomfortable because they challenge self-image. Men who have unresolved abandonment or control patterns often feel the strongest reaction. Calm withdrawal echoes earlier experiences where emotional availability was inconsistent or unpredictable. The nervous system responds as if something important is being lost, even when no loss has been declared. This is why the reaction can feel intense and confusing. The woman's calm is critical here. If withdrawal were emotional or reactive, the man could focus outward. He could respond to anger, defend himself, or disengage cleanly. Calm offers no such outlet. The emotional energy has nowhere to go except inward. That inward turn is what activates unresolved material. Some men attempt to regain balance by testing boundaries. They may send casual messages, reappear without depth, or attempt humor to reestablish normalcy. These are unconscious efforts to see if the emotional system will reset. If the woman remains calm and consistent, the pattern continues to surface. The man must decide whether to grow or retreat. Calm withdrawal also challenges identity. Many men see themselves as emotionally independent, yet their reaction reveals reliance on emotional access. This contradiction creates internal tension. Rather than confronting it directly, some men project, labeling the woman as distant or confusing. This projection protects the ego while avoiding emotional responsibility. For men who are emotionally developed, calm withdrawal can become a moment of clarity. They recognize the space as an invitation rather than a threat. They step forward with intention, communication, and accountability. The unresolved pattern begins to resolve through conscious engagement. For others, the discomfort feels too destabilizing. They disengage entirely, not because they do not care, but because unresolved patterns lack the tools to tolerate emotional ambiguity. Calm withdrawal becomes a mirror they are not ready to look into. The power of calm withdrawal lies in its neutrality. It does not demand, it does not explain, it does not explain, it does not chase resolution. It simply maintains self-respect and emotional containment. This neutrality removes emotional bargaining from the dynamic. Men often mistake emotional intensity for connection because intensity creates movement. Calm withdrawal creates stillness, and stillness exposes what movement hides. In that stillness exposes what movement hides. In that stillness, unresolved emotional patterns have no distractions. They rise naturally. The reaction a man has to calm withdrawal is diagnostic. It reveals how he handles emotional uncertainty, self-regulation, and responsibility. The woman does not need to analyze or interpret his response. The pattern reveals itself through behavior. Calm withdrawal is not about control, it is about alignment. When a woman steps back calmly, she aligns with her own emotional truth. That alignment disrupts dynamics built on emotional imbalance. Men feel this shift intuitively. What emerges next depends on the man's capacity: growth or avoidance, presence or disappearance, depth or deflection. The unresolved emotional pattern decides the direction long before the conscious mind catches up. And all of it begins not with confrontation, but with quiet, regulated space that refuses to carry what was never meant to be carried.